everyone. I'm Ido. I'm one of the co-founders and CEO at Blockade.
Cool. Taylor?
It's not longer.
Okay, I'll go a little bit longer. At Blockade, we work with some of the biggest companies in the space to protect their users from fraud.
Wait, Ido, hold that much closer to your mouth.
Okay, is this better?
Yeah, even
Okay.
closer.
Like this?
Yes, that's
okay.
right. Okay.
Like an ice cream
Cool.
cone. That's what
So
that's
I'm
about.
Ido. I'm one of the co-founders and CEO at Blockade. At Blockade, we work with some of the biggest companies in the space to protect their users from fraud, phishing, hacks. Some of the greats, like Nadav and Taylor here as well. Excited to be here.
Thank you. I'm Taylor Monahan. I work for MetaMask. I've been building wallets in the space since Ethereum launched. I've always really been focused on user safety and figuring out how we can actually help our users be safe and not get completely wrecked. And so at MetaMask, I kind of sit in between the product teams, the security teams, the customer support teams, and really do a lot of research and threat intel so that we can use the intelligence we have to translate that into improvements to our product that actually provide a good user experience for our very diverse and ever-growing user base.
Alrighty, my name's Nadav. I'm the CTO over at OpenSea. I've been in the Ethereum space for a good 7 years now. Prior to OpenSea, I ran a company called Dharma, which, among other things, at one point in time ran a fairly popular smart wallet. And so across the Dharma experience, and then also obviously OpenSea more recently, I've been very, very exposed from multiple angles to various Web3 security and kind of user experience concerns. And I've had the pleasure of getting to work with Taylor and Ido as a result quite a bit. So yeah, fun to be here.
Okay, so before we talk about security solutions, I think we need to quantify just how bad the problem is, because I feel like people don't fully appreciate just how widespread certain schemes are. Can you guys just help set the scene, share some anecdotes, some war stories of just how bad it is out there?
Dude, it's so bad. I think that it's really easy to lose sight of for an individual user to come into the space, even if they've been around or they're previously around, they're venturing out into the Web3 world. There's a lot of touch points that are very Web2, like Twitter. And it's they're just constantly bombarded with scams. And I think a lot of times we think about the rug pulls or the DeFi exploits, but your average person is also confronted with account takeovers where they're doing a fake airdrop. Your really average person who may not be in crypto at all is actually still confronted with crypto scams via pig butchering and these large scale operations that essentially onboard individuals to crypto in order to steal their money. And because of the diversity of scams and the evolution of the scammers, and just how, I guess the new technology has not quite evolved to whack-a-mole all the different things, if you're not really paranoid and really skeptical all the time, you can very easily end up getting wrecked in one way or another. And so that's what, when I think about things, it's how do we get better across the board? And the numbers are huge. I don't know, do you have numbers?
We can drop some numbers in a second, yeah. Maybe our take here is, the way we look at it is, I don't know, I think we're early days of crypto. Nadav's been here for 7 years, but we're still early days.
Ask Taylor how long she's been in.
Dude, I've been in this space a decade now, and it blew my mind when someone told me that the other day.
So, but I think like the early days of the internet, where anything you clicked could install some nasty malware, adware, or toolbars, and users had more toolbars than browser. If anyone here has an elderly grandparent or something, you probably have seen some shit. And so I think Web3 is similarly like that, right? Where anything you click can drain your funds. It's just much, much, much worse because, here you're, in the past, people were stealing data. Here, they're actually stealing people's money.
Quick question for you, and then I want to go over to Nadav in terms of war stories. Yesterday, the Coinbase outage, people seeing their accounts go to zero. Obviously, Blockade, one of the things that you guys do is integrate into MetaMask, and I think that, correct me if I'm wrong, but you're also integrated into Coinbase Wallet. Do you have any insight into because like rumors abound in terms of what actually happened. What Coinbase is saying is that it was an outage and they're dealing with it. But any thoughts on what we saw yesterday?
So I think it's no surprise to people that, as numbers go up, volumes go up. I don't want to comment on anything that has to do with Coinbase or anything like that, but I would assume that, they, like us, are seeing insane volumes. Taylor maybe can comment on what MetaMask is seeing. We can comment on what we're seeing through our customers. The price of Bitcoin isn't the only thing that's rising. So,
Yeah, I think that we just released numbers, and we just re-hit 30 million monthly active users, and so yeah, we're back. But with the, I'm so scared. But with that, it's a lot of times when people come flooding back, it's really this onslaught of traffic. And if you have not kept your servers at full, open, empty capacity for the entire bear market, when they come flooding back in that volume, it can be really hard to keep everything online. It's just, yeah. It's basically like a DDoS, except it's all legit people.
most is legit.
Most.
And Nadav, if you have anything to add, and I also just kind of want to get into some of the nuances of who these attackers are. I mean, Taylor, you've talked about the skitties as one way to describe these bad actors. And I wonder if I leave it to you too. I'd love to kind of break apart who are your biggest threat vectors right now? And then I want you to tell me about the skitties.
I'll talk about the skitties.
So yeah, I mean, little story time here is a lot of the reason why I ended up working so closely with these two is because OpenSea is in many ways there's probably 2 or 3 applications that are at the mouth of the funnel of almost everybody who enters Web3, and those are probably MetaMask, Uniswap, and OpenSea, basically. If you look at it in terms of just sheer traffic and normie users coming in, right? As a result, we're one of their first touch points. And what's really, really common in the NFT world are these things called drainers, right? And so basically, there's this whole sort of illicit black market out there that I think Taylor or Ido can tell you a lot more about, where people essentially buy these they'll buy pieces of code essentially that are this is your gold or your platinum drainer or something like that, and then they'll go and just spin up thousands of different scam links and scam websites, and they will find every which creative way possible to get normal users with wallets installed to click these links and then get all of their NFTs drained. It can happen through Twitter, it can happen through Discord, it can happen through email, it can happen through you name it. And the fun thing is that often these users are relatively inexperienced. They'll have their NFT stolen, and they will immediately think, oh, I got to reach out to OpenSea support because they'll help me get my NFTs back. Of course, we don't have the ability to do that because we don't control the blockchain. That's kind of the whole point of this, right? So anyways, it specifically during the last bull run, this became a hair on fire problem for OpenSea, just because of the sheer numbers were insane. It wasn't that people were getting their NFT stolen on OpenSea, or even getting their NFT stolen by clicking a link from OpenSea. It's just that they would assume that we had some sort of ability to either rectify the situation or help it out. And so it was a major support load problem. And so as a result, I ended up having to learn a lot about this weird, crazy economy. That's how I ended up actually meeting Ido, because they had a very novel and interesting solution. And then we got the team together, and we were we need to stop these bad actors. I don't know, Taylor, maybe you can tell them a bit about the skitties and where they come from.
Yeah, so we call them the skitties. It's an evolution of the script kitties. It's basically, they're usually young. They're usually in the West, English speaking. And they hang out on the forums, and they have their own distinct culture. There's overlaps with the sim swapping groups as well. And the reason that we call them script kiddies is that they're not necessarily advanced hackers with deep code knowledge, right? But what they are able to do is they are able to take a kit. so like a package or a set of software, they're able to buy this kit that an actual development team built. They take that, and then they basically just sort of like retrofit like a logo on it, the name. And so what they'll do is they'll like take over a Twitter account, say for a new hot project that's doing something like legit. Maybe they're launching, maybe they're doing an airdrop, whatever it is. They'll take over that account's Twitter, or they'll spin up like a bunch of fake impersonation Twitters, and then they'll basically spam these fake airdrop links. So it'll be like a giveaway scam, it'll be like claim your airdrop, it'll be like get your free NFT, those sorts of things. But what the skitties themselves are actually doing is they're just like slapping a logo on this website and setting up like, like 1,000 Cloudflare accounts, and then just like mass spamming it on social media, on Discord, however they can get it out to you. And then if you click the link and visit the site, it'll look like a legit site, like most sites that you visit, where it's like a landing page, a big button in the middle where it's asking you to take this fun action, and if you take this action, you're going to get something free. But in reality, when you click that button, it drains your wallet. And this is why we call them wallet drainers, because it literally drains your wallet. It'll take all your assets, whatever assets that you approve, it'll just sweep them all out. So whether that's all your NFTs, whether that's specific tokens, they have a bunch of different like technical mechanisms that they use. And if you if you click approve on that transaction, it's over. Your stuff is being swept out. And a lot of people just, because they don't fundamentally understand the inner workings of the signature, and because the website promised them free money, free NFT, free whatever, people click these links like really fast, a lot. And it's a really big problem because they are these like young, like weird, it's a weird culture that they have going on. And so they also evolve very, very quickly. Like they're kind of crazy, they're very loud, but they will rapidly innovate their drainer kits. So like if we implement something to block some of the things that they're using to steal from people, they will, in their Telegram groups, basically run around yelling and getting like very upset. And then they'll push an update to their own drainer kit, and then they will like market it to their buyers, and they'll be like, we evaded the MetaMask blockade thing, no more red screen, buy now, $50 upgrade, guys. And then all the skitties will be like, oh, cool, they evaded the MetaMask blockade thing, cool. And then they'll buy it again, and then it continues on. Most of the time, when they're screaming about this stuff, it's like classic crypto sales. It's like an empty promise. But sometimes they do actually innovate enough to get around some of our stuff, and then we have to push updates to our own app in order to continue blocking them. And it's just like it's a total game of cat and mouse. And they're they're vulgar little kids.
And like you said that like in some cases they're more successful than nation state sponsored actors, like something like an $80 million a year run rate business.
Yeah. So they did last year specifically the wallet drainers. I think the number is they sold $330 million, and that's all from these websites, and that's all from like individual retail users. So like the average loss size is actually relatively low, right? North Korea state-sponsored actors will go after like say like HTX, Poloniex, like these big name things, and they'll steal $100 million. The skitties, on the other hand, are stealing $330 million over the course of a year, but they're doing it in like $1,000 here, $2,000 here, and that should give you an idea of how broad the scope is, right? In order to steal $330 million, $1,000 at a time, like that is a deluge of scam sites.
Okay, so shifting to solutions, Nadav, this kind of goes to a point that you were making earlier, like who owns the problem of users getting wrecked? And so you mentioned this, like if somebody has their NFT drain, they're coming to you, even though it's not happening on the OpenSea platform. And I guess I just wanted to like put this question to all of you, like how do you navigate like owning the problem? Because I feel like you guys do on stage. Not everyone feels the same way. So I kind of wonder what people are saying, like on a Zoom meeting behind closed doors, about where the onus lies and how you're navigating that as well.
I think it's a full stack problem, right? So I think basically everybody has a role to play. People who design protocols have to be aware of like how those protocols will be phished and how people will use them maliciously. Applications that have large footprints in terms of users, like OpenSea, we play like an enormous role in either educating or evangelizing certain solutions, and then obviously like making sure that scammy links or fraud doesn't occur on our website. Wallets are kind of like the first line of defense, and that's why companies like Blockade are so important in terms of being able to kind of give them the sort of tools to beat the skitties, quote unquote. And then I think there's just like a broader community aspect of it, right? Like it's like there's also just generally an onus on the broader community to make sure that like there's a certain level of like social education that happens for people who are entering the space, to like that people know that they need to be cautious when they're like navigating Web3. They need to be aware of the existence of these sorts of drainer links and whatnot. So I do think it's a community-wide thing that needs to be tackled.
And I mean, the thinking has evolved, right? Like, whereas like a year ago, it was firmly, the blame was being placed on users, that mindset has changed. And why is that? What's evolved in the thinking there?
Yeah, I think that's a great point. We started Blockade because of this problem with Nadav, with Taylor, with everybody else, that we work with. And when we had initial conversations with a lot of these companies, the blame was set on users, right? You signed it, it's on you. I think that ultimately has changed over the course of this past year. Companies in the space, primarily the leading companies in the space, like OpenSea, like MetaMask, understand that the products people use need to protect them and need to be safe. I think there are still companies in the space that don't think that way, but there are a lot more that do now. And I think Taylor talked about this game of cat and mouse where we improve, they improve, we improve, they improve. At the end of the day, it's a financially motivated game. Once it doesn't make financial sense anymore, they'll leave. And we've seen them leave platforms that we've deployed solutions to. And I think the game has started. This game of cat and mouse has started, and I'm really excited for this year to see what the skitties do, also what the nation state actors do, and go from there. I think we've seen also nation state actors sponsor these drainers, and over the course of time. And so the same tools that these skitties are using, or the same methods, I would say, are similar to some of these nation state actors as well.
And like Taylor, you sit between the product team and the end users who are getting wrecked. You're navigating that issue of urgency. Like, what is it? And kind of going to that larger point that Ito just brought up, the arms race that exists. Like, how do you keep up team morale as like you solve one problem only to just play a game of whack-a-mole?
Yeah, it's really tough. It's really tough, especially when I think this space historically has put a huge amount of emphasis on things like user privacy, and like the idea of like security being sort of limited to like your stack, like your specific app or your specific protocol. And like the second that some external force comes into play, or the second it's like, oh, well, that would have never happened if the Twitter account hadn't been compromised, it's much easier for product teams in general to be like, oh, well, maybe Twitter should fix that problem. And just sort of like push off responsibility. I think it's a really natural thing when you're confronted with the fact that like your users are losing money. It's a really natural thing to not want to like internalize that fully, right? You don't want to think that like what you're building is harming people. And so the way that like I think about it, the way that a lot of our product leads think about it is that user safety is part of user experience. They have to be safe in order to have a good user experience. In fact, if they're not safe, it's a critically bad, like you lose that user forever. They don't come back to crypto after when they lose all their money, they don't come back. And so when you think about that, it's like, okay, well, let's do this to improve the user experience. Let's do this to protect people. And it's less about like, oh, well, is it our product's fault or is it this product's fault? It's more about like, we're trying to build the best product for people. We're trying to provide the best experience for people. How do we do that? And reality check, making sure that like different threat actors can't take advantage of your product or abuse your product's feature set to get at users is a really, really important one. And like Nadav said earlier, like this really is something that has to happen at every layer of the stack. The wallet obviously is a big one, but dApps can do more and should do more to educate their users and also set the right example, right? Like the reality is like if everyone's doing free airdrops, and then the skitties start doing free airdrops, everyone who did an airdrop, everyone who said click this button and sign this transaction and get your airdrop, every single person who did that trained those users to think that that's how the world worked and that this is acceptable. And now everyone is like, cool, like free money, let's go, except that that gets their wallet drained. And so I think that like we really have to be considered, like, what are you training people to do, and what is your end goal? And personally, like the airdrop people, like stop airdropping people. Stop having people sign transactions to get an airdrop. Like, I can't even tell the legit sites from the scam sites at this point. Oftentimes, the skitties have more polished sites than people who are legit doing claim airdrops. Sorry, but it's true.
I will say really quickly, though, on a note of optimism, though, I think it's important to acknowledge where we are today is like literally orders of magnitude better than we were like a year ago. I think like where we were like a year ago was like basically like it was ridiculously easy to be one of these skitties. Like it was just free money on the table. It was just like waiting for you if you got into that little business. Now there's like in the cat and mouse game, now there is actually like an adversary. Like there is now like a significantly higher barrier of entry, and so like that doesn't mean that it's not going to keep evolving and that you don't have to keep up with it. But it's like, I think Ito mentioned this earlier, right? It's like these scammers, like they're not, for the most part, they're not that sophisticated, and they are fairly short attention span and are trying to do the thing that is easiest, that's the lowest barrier to entry for them to like make some money. And so often even imperfect amounts of friction are like 90% of what you need. And so what I'm really curious to see, especially now that we're in a place where like it seems like we are quote unquote back. It seems like the top line volume numbers in general are probably about to go up. I'm excited to see like what's the updated metric going to be like on that theft loss, right? I'm willing to bet it's going to be a lot lower.
I mean, in what you've seen, Ito, like through your work at Blockade, is the problem getting better? Like to Nadav's point, like have you seen numerical improvements in terms of like how people are being, I don't know, protected against some of these schemes?
Yeah, we monitor these things very closely, and we see measurable improvements, right? I think, through our work with MetaMask over the course of these past couple of months, as we're rolling out, we've been able to protect users from, over $100 million worth of assets from being stolen. We see measurable improvements inside of OpenSea, right? I think since we started rolling out with OpenSea, we had seen, thousands, sometimes even a day, of these kind of malicious links go down to zero. And so you can see that friction, even if imperfect, is substantial enough to move these attackers off platform. We see measurable amounts of money being protected, like vast amounts of money being protected. That number that Taylor quoted, that could be a lot higher. We've done a lot this year, and we're going to continue to do a lot next year.
I mean, Taylor just made the point that wallets and dApps have really put themselves on the front lines of making it harder for these bad actors to be successful. Outside of that sphere, and maybe Nadav, you can talk about this. What about like NFTs for digital identity or protecting information? Like, what other solutions are you guys looking into?
Sorry, could you clarify the question?
Yeah, is OpenSea looking into using NFTs to mitigate risks associated with identity theft or data manipulation? Like, is that one thing that is at all being talked about?
So I mean, there's definitely a certain amount of people there's a subset of the NFT industry that is interested in a lot of this kind of like own your own data and like soul-bound NFTs being sort of like a proxy for either exposing that data or exposing some sort of element of that data that could thereafter be proven with like a zero knowledge proof or something like that. So I think it's something that there is like a niche in the community that's interested in it, and it might have some pretty cool implications for like traditional Web2 kind of like data security. But it's not something that I would say like OpenSea, the company right now, is like very actively like working on in any capacity.
I mean, what about and I put this to any of you, like I just don't know how much it is a part of the conversation when you think about, forward-looking moves with security, but, privacy-preserving tech like ZK proofs, are they being leveraged to fortify Web3 against data breaches and privacy violations? Is that less a part of the conversation right now?
I think that, there's like a lot of like amazing teams out there who are doing the like upfront deep work on these things. I think that because like OpenSea and MetaMask, like we have so many users today. We don't get to play those fun long-term research games. And so like for us, what we do is like we watch these spaces and the things that are happening, the research that's being done. We watch it really, really closely, and like we support everyone who does that. But until it's like, can provide like real substantial value to our users, it's not something that we personally invest like a ton of time into. That said, like I'm personally really excited for some of the opportunities around like the zero knowledge stuff and identity, because if we can nail that, if we can get that right, it adds a whole nother layer to this ecosystem beyond just that financially motivated stuff. And I think that that's really interesting. I am also concerned, though, if we cannot protect users from getting their NFTs rugged, how can we protect them from getting their identity rugged, right? Like that's my biggest question, right? Is how that intersection, like how do we use the tools that we're building today, the experience that we are having today, to make sure that in the future, when there's a much more intangible sets of like value, like people's data, right? People's identity. How do we make sure that users actually stay in full control? Because again, if you just tie the user's data or identity to an NFT, like it might get stolen if we haven't completely solved that problem.
I feel like in the post-FTX era, you started to see a lot of people shift into self-custody for the first time. It is a very difficult thing to navigate, even for the best of us who have been in the space for a while. I don't know, like Taylor, with the work that you're doing, as people move away from centralized exchanges into self-custody wallets, how is MetaMask looking to help people through that? Even something like tackling seed phrase recovery.
Yeah, that's like where a lot of our effort is helping improve like a lot of people think of it as like the onboarding flow, and they often like think of that as like the first 2 steps in your application. Like, ooh, like let's get some fun illustrations in the onboarding flow. But the way that we think about it is like the holistic user's experience, that person's actual experience. From going someone that has no crypto, is like crypto curious, we call them, right? And they're like, what's that? What's that over there? What is their experience like from being that crypto curious person to learning about it, to deciding which exchange to use, which on-ramp to use, which wallet to use, what's the value propositions that are actually converting them? And then how do they actually go about like from point A to point C to point D, right? They have to get their fiat money on ramp, whether that's through a centralized exchange or like MetaMask, we have like on-ramps, partners where you can basically directly on-ramp from fiat directly into your MetaMask. And then what do people do from there, right? Like when a person installs MetaMask, does that mean that they actually have like any actual money in their MetaMask? Or are they just like installing it and looking at the box and being like, cool, like, what are people actually doing with this? And I think that we have a lot of room to improve here, especially with people. The flow, I think a lot of people are like seeing on social media, seeing number go up, yay, and it's very, very financial, and so they're sort of like sprinting in that way, right? Like, ooh, money, let's go. But I hope, I've been hoping for the last decade, that the applications, right, and the value props of these applications are going to like attract users, and the user is going to have a better onboard experience from those specific applications, right? So they want to achieve something, they want to do something, this application is going to solve their problem in some way, and then that flow, they like onboard via the application and come around to MetaMask that way, rather than like sprinting into MetaMask like running for money. And it's going to be, it's a journey. It's an endless journey. But I'm really excited to see where like this year and the next cycle in general, I'm really excited to see how we evolve in that time period.
I feel like there's also this like philosophical question of permissionlessness and privacy and how you enable users in these decentralized platforms to maintain that ethos. Like what level of censorship ideologically is acceptable here? That was such like a wordy, cumbersome way of wording that, but I think you get where I'm going.
That's the line that we have to toe, right? Because I always say that if MetaMask really wants to ensure that no user loses money, the easiest most foolproof way to do that is just never let any user send any transaction. You can put your money in and you cannot take it out. You will never get rugged. Like, we win, right? But that actually doesn't work at all, because then you've lost the whole value. The whole point of this industry, of what we're building, is enabling both end users, right, real people in the world, to do and interact with whatever they want in this space. And we also want to empower builders to build things that enable people to do whatever they want. And so how do you accomplish that, right? How do you actually build a product that empowers people to do whatever they want, build whatever they want, create new unthinkable things, while also preventing people from sending transactions that they don't want to send, right? Like, we're making an assumption on behalf of the user. And so we think a lot about consent. We think a lot about giving users information so they can make the right choice. We think less about, like, taking active steps to, like, censor the user. We don't want to do that. We want to make every single choice the user should be informed about the outcomes and what's going to happen with this. And then they won't send that. They don't want to send that transaction, and they know it.
I think, when we look at these things and decentralization and privacy and, ethoses of the blockchain that we all stand for, and we look at that on kind of the scale of onboarding and growth and bringing in more users, oftentimes these things are put on one end versus the other, right? They're kind of, they contradict each other in some way. I think, what we all understand is that, like, privacy, decentralization, these things aren't that important until they are, and then they're the only thing and then that's the only thing that matters. And so I think, OpenSea and MetaMask specifically, right? These people here are up here with me are modest, right? But they have to toe that line for the whole industry, because they have it on their shoulders to onboard users, right? To actually bring people into the space, make them safe, make these products usable, but then also preserve these things that are so important to all of us here. And so, where oftentimes, we see user complaint and some of these things, they're misguided in the sense that they don't understand the actual kind of responsibility that my peers up here have in needing to kind of maintain that balance.
So in our last 2 minutes here, I want to hear from each of you on this last point. We're going into a bull market. Nadav, you brought up the point that this is kind of like when you pressure test the system. And yes, we've seen measurable improvements during this bear market the last few years, but now we're going to see how that plays out when there's a lot more interest and a lot more money. Like, Taylor, you talked about being up to 30 million users. What keeps you up at night? Like, what are you terrified of? But also, like, what proactive measures can either an end user or a platform take? Love to hear from you guys on any one of those points or all of them.
Use Blockade.
Yeah.
It's simple.
Yeah, I think that if you're building in this space, I encourage you to be willing to build things that are not perfect. Do not let perfect be the enemy of good, okay? Iterate quickly, experiment, and take any measures you can that will have any impact on improving users' lives, protecting them, preventing loss. I think that last cycle, the biggest mistake that we made as a company was not acting fast enough and not being willing to experiment, because we didn't have confidence that the things that we were pushing into the product would have an impact. And I think that slowed us down in a lot of ways that ultimately were not helpful. Even if the solution is not perfect, even if there's ways that the bad actors can get around the solution, it's still necessary to implement those things, because adding that friction and adding that cost and protecting that segment of users is worth it every single time. So I really encourage you guys, especially as the market speeds up, take any and all actions, even if they're not perfect, please.
Nadav, final word.
I think the thing that keeps me up is the known unknowns. I think if we are going into another bull market and we are about to grace the precipice of another order of magnitude of growth, I think it's more likely than not that, like, there will be something new or some new meta or some new pattern that will completely kind of change the way that the sort of dynamic plays out this time around. And I think companies like OpenSea, I'm sure MetaMask would agree as well, is like, we've spent a lot of this bear market basically preparing for this eventuality. Like, we've been, OpenSea used to be known as BrokenSea. It took us a long time to get good at scaling and get good at keeping the site up under more traffic. And so we'll see how we hold up over the coming months. But there's only so much you can prepare for, right? And so I think it'll be interesting to see like what are we missing, right? Like what's the X factor that actually propels us to this next order of magnitude.
Thank you so much to my panelists and to the audience for joining us, and ETHDenver for putting on this session.
Thank you.